Hello, friends, and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast. My name is Mark Lesney. I'm one of the hosts, and I am here with my sister-in-law, business partner, and registered dietitian extraordinaire, Danielle Glesney. Danielle, how are things up in the St. Louis area? The kids have gone back to school, right?
Yes, that is good. And we're back to cold weather. We had like 2 days of really warm weather, so that was very enjoyable for me. Jared was really upset about it.
Yeah, we got the same thing. We parallel path you guys a bit in terms of the weather systems between St. Louis and Nashville, and it tends to be like a little more mild down here, of course. So like we're a few degrees off, but we had the same thing. We went from that cold snap to 70s, and we were kind of hanging out in the 70s, had some rain, and then it dropped back down into being more chilly. So we've got, but we can't complain. We're not the Great White North or anything like that. So I can't complain about, 6-8 weeks of a little bit of chill, maybe an inch of snow here and there, but pretty easy. So, well, we are doing something different. For those of you that are listening, we are excited that you're here. We're doing something a little different in January. And so we will continue to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to submit those on the website. You can go to imagonutrition.com, imagonutrition.com/podcast. Scroll down that page. There's a web form. You can submit your nutrition questions. We absolutely plan to continue doing that. But for the month of January, we thought it would be fun to dig into some popular diets. Obviously, this is a normal time of year where a lot of folks are at least open to or thinking about or trying new or hearing about diets. And so what we're doing is just taking a couple weeks to look at some of the most popular diets, not all the diets that are out there. And so last week, if you were around for that episode, if not, you can always go back and listen. We took a look at keto, arguably the most popular, or at least getting the most press these days. I don't know if we can quantify most popular. I've tried to dig into a little bit of research. Of course, it depends on who you're, who's you're surveying in terms of what's the most popular. But certainly keto is something that has really kind of made a splash in American culture the last 5, 10, 15 years. And so we took a look at keto. And this week, we're going to take a look at another interesting topic. And so I'm going to do less talking than last week. Some of you are grateful for that. We're going to hear more from Danielle on this. She's going to guide us through some stuff. And I might chime in with some random thoughts or awkward feelings about things. But Danielle, what are we looking at this week?
We are going to look at vegan and vegetarian diet patterns.
Ooh, here we go. All right, I'll mute my mic.
I also want to do like a quick introduction. I was a little less prepared last topic. And so I just I think we kind of wanted to clarify. We're talking mainly on like long-term healthy body weight maintenance diets when we're going through this month of January. So there are short-term diets that can be very beneficial. I work in medical nutrition therapy. So, if you have GI symptoms, there's a diet for that. If you have other conditions, could really benefit from short-term diets. And so I just wanted to qualify that, for example, we just talked about keto, and there are benefits, I think, as far as the diabetes research goes in keto, that relationship there is relatively new, even though keto has been around for a while. So I think, we talked about some of those benefits. I don't want to be a spoiler alert, so listen to that episode, but, improving blood sugar control or lipid metabolism, things like that. If you're following a diet short-term, you just really need to remember if it needs to be short-term, it needs to be short-term, right? Like if it's eliminating a whole food group or eliminating several quality food sources, then we do want to remember to have an exit plan and what kind of things to follow long-term. So I think that's why I guess me and Mark were interested in doing this in the month of January, is because most often we see that we're following these diets and we're thinking they're supposed to be long-term. And that's not always the best thing for our health. So I just wanted to qualify that a little bit.
And I was just going to say, so I'm guilty too of, I get worked up about stuff, and I'm an Enneagram 8 at my core, wing 7, if you will, if you know anything about that. I'm the challenger. I like to generally kind of fight things. That's my general position. And while we do have a lot of criticism for diet culture, the point being take a look at your goals, take a look at both short and long-term approaches to those goals, right? And work with your medical professional, work with a dietitian, work with folks that are trained in these things. And I love what you said, and I actually have a case study for this week, since we even recorded our last podcast. I love the term exit plan. And so I recently, this week, I had a new Imago Nutrition client that came on board, and he reached out to me. And I love what he said. He gave me all his body metrics. He gave me his macro breakdown. He gave me the weight loss that he has already achieved. He gave me his percentage body fat reduction over the last few months. He's in an amazing spot right now. And he reached out and said, I need to know how to get out of this, because if I continue, I'm going to shrivel up. He said, I'm just on this. And he said, I'm either gaining weight or I'm losing weight. And right now I'm at the end of another phase of losing weight. I'm feeling good. I'm strong. I'm doing jujitsu. I'm strength training. He's lost 10% body fat, right, in the last X amount of months. And he's in a really good place physically, but he was desperate for an exit plan because he realized what he hasn't had in the past was an exit plan. He was either on or he was off. And when he was off, he was undoing what was happened when he was on. And when he's on, he undoes what it's off. But he didn't know that maintenance. And so it was a fascinating, I love all the work that we get to do, whether people are starting the weight loss journey, in the middle of the weight loss journey and phasing through that, or exiting the weight loss journey, right? And so it's like that with many things. If you have these goals, take a look at the short-term implications, take a look at the long-term implications, and more so than how am I going to achieve my goal, not more so, but we also need to ask, what am I going to do when I get there? Because a lot of people don't realize that when you get to your quote-unquote goal, if that's a number on the scale or a body fat percentage, something like that, then the real work begins. Sometimes it is harder. I would say a lot of times it's harder to maintain results than it is to initially achieve them. And so all that's to say, I appreciated your qualifier at that as well, because as much as I like to, kind of fight and challenge and talk about diet culture and all that sort of stuff, we do have a measured approach when it comes to these things. We do want to take a methodical approach, and we do believe in client autonomy. We are going to make recommendations, but we do not tell you what you must do. We work inside your framework. We work inside some of your considerations. And so as we get into vegetarian and veganism, if you were to come to us and say, look, I don't eat meat, but I have these health goals, we're not going to say you have to eat meat in order to achieve your health goals, right? It's just not how it's going to be. And so what we're going to do is we're going to work with nutritional strategies within that client autonomy. So just know that this is not a dictatorship by any means. We're here to help you, support you, help you achieve your goals, and then perhaps most importantly, maintain those goals. So I appreciate you qualifying with that. I know we talked about that a little bit before we hit record, and I think that was very important. So thanks for doing that. And so
of course.
I said I wasn't going to talk as much, and I'm already starting to talk a lot. And so let me toss it back to Danielle. Why don't you work us through veganism and vegetarian? And I think we're going to kind of just take a general roadmap of sort of what is it, what are some, just really what is veganism, what is vegetarian, even kind of what's the difference between the two, right? What does that look like practically? Because there's some variation within that. We'll talk a little bit about pros and cons. And then again, I think we'll kind of circle back to our last point of do we recommend it? What are some next steps forward if people are considering this? So with that, I'll toss it back to you, Danielle.
All right. So the first step is always, kind of what type of the vegetarian or vegan diet pattern are you following? So vegan, by definition, is no dairy or eggs. So no animal products at all. So no meats, no dairy, no eggs. The next one, lacto-vegetarian, has dairy, but no eggs. So lacto-vegetarian has dairy, but no eggs. And lacto-ovo-vegetarian has dairy and eggs. So that one's most commonly referred to as vegetarian. So lacto-ovo-vegetarian is most often just referred to as vegetarian. Another one is whole foods plant-based, could be WFPB. And this is no animal products and no refined foods. So this is often commonly referred to as plant-based. So those are your four general terms in this space that we're going to talk about today. One thing to think about, so some vegetarian diets may be up to 75% carbohydrates. So that's a large percent of your macronutrients. And with that being said, you have a little more pressure to do it right. So when if you're considering this, or if you're already in these diet patterns, we want to really want you to focus on how can we do it right? The answer really is high quality food choices, but high variety as well. So there is most certainly the possibility of doing a vegetarian or vegan diet and being very, very healthy. And there's also most certainly the possibility of doing a vegetarian or vegan diet and being very, very unhealthy. So I think when you think about really anybody on any type of diet pattern, that's the possibility as well. But I think with the, we're not, some of them, as you can see, we're eliminating a food. There's a little more pressure as far as doing it right, if that makes sense. So those are your definitions. Now let's shift into like pros and cons. Okay. So some pros is, research shows that some these diet patterns can be linked to lower incidence of obesity, cardiovascular disease, and hypertension. So once again, if done right. So you can kind of put if done right in front of all of these pros, because obviously if we're not choosing high quality food choices and have really low variety, these probably won't apply, these pros. So these diet patterns may be higher in vitamins and minerals such as vitamin A, C, E, thiamine, folate, etc. These diet patterns can help with glycemic control. Once again, if done right, because these carbohydrates, these 75% carbs, can be really fiber abundant. So like if you have a lot of fiber attached to your carbs, you're going to decrease blood sugar spikes. Vegetarian protein sources are often packed with fiber. So like you think about a piece of chicken doesn't have any fiber, but you think about some beans, you have some fiber. So you're going to have that benefit. And then some, heart healthy fats, vitamins and minerals, and phytochemicals are also in those vegetarian protein sources. The last pro that I have here is calorie density is lower. So the volume of food is higher with these diet patterns. So if you struggle with portion control, if you have a lower calorie dense food, it's going to be a lot easier. But that's not to say it's true. You can obviously put sauces that increase the calories and things like that. So shifting over to the cons, okay, if the vegan or vegetarian diet patterns don't align with your food preferences, so you enjoy chicken or you enjoy meat, this is going to be really hard to follow. So that is a disadvantage for long term. Once again, you could maybe follow the short term if you'd like. We kind of already mentioned this con. If not planned well, this can lead to nutrition deficiencies. So when we take out a food, we really need to make sure we're getting the nutrients that are provided in that food in other sources. So if that's not planned out well, we can have some nutrition deficiencies. And we're going to go through a couple of those too.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, because again, we're doing this, we're comparing our notes. So I wanted to make sure we kind of defined what some of those are so people can be aware of that. So
absolutely.
Keep it going.
Yeah. Proteins from vegetarian sources are not complete proteins. So I learned about this way back in school. So amino acids are the building blocks of protein. And to have a complete protein, you need all of them. And so protein from vegetarian sources are typically lacking in one or two. And lysine is one example. So some good sources such as tofu, tempeh, soy, and lentils need to be enjoyed daily. So you unfortunately can't typically be a picky eater when you're vegetarian, because you do need to find, like I said, those nutrients elsewhere And if you don't like all those foods I just mentioned, it might be really challenging to get those complete proteins. And it was thought you had to have those together to make a complete protein, but you most just need to have it within the day.
And on that, if I could just kind of give a little, a bit of a context for that too. This is one of my areas that I love talking about too, is complete proteins. And so a lot of times people, again, when we talk about a complete protein in context, there's 20 amino acids. These are the building blocks of protein, right? 9 of those amino acids your body cannot produce on its own. Those are what we call essential amino acids. They're essential because we need to source them. Our body can't produce them, right? And so while it is wrong to say you cannot get all those essential amino acids from plant-based sources, you can. The question is, are you? And the question is, and when I have discussions with people or they bring that consideration to the table, I say, can you show me on paper that you are stacking those 9 essential amino acids in a significant way over time? So it's one thing to have a theory. It's one thing to understand the nutrition science. It's another thing to practically be applying it to your life. So while it is not true for people on one end to be like, oh, you can't get complete proteins, you can't get your essential amino acids without eating red meat every other day. No, that's not true. But you've got folks on the other side, they're saying, oh, you can absolutely get it from plant-based and we're totally fine. But when you actually take a survey of their food, a lot of times they're not stacking that appropriate. It's not that hard, but it does take focus. And so all that's to say, that's what we're talking about in terms of actual numbers. And so an incomplete protein will likely be missing 1 or more of those essential amino acids. So you just simply have to purpose to know which ones you might be deficient in, right? And then to purpose to source those so that you do achieve, that full 20 count amino acid in your consistent regimen. This is not just like a one-time thing. It's like, oh, I'm missing this one, so I eat that food once. It's got to be consistent. Again, these are things that are called essential because they are essential. So just wanted to kind of qualify that and show them sort of the scope numerically when it comes to amino acid profiles.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. But I'm always like too straightforward. Like I like how you kind of explain the background a little bit. I just talk too little sometimes. I
like that you like that I talk too much.
Concise. Okay, so the next one is if you don't consume fish, your intake of omega-3 fatty acids is low. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of heart health benefits, brain health, and many others. So supplementation may be needed for vegetarian and vegan diet plans. So that would be possibly a con for some people. Sometimes supplements can be expensive. Supplements are not regulated by the FDA. It can be confusing on which ones to buy. So that might be a con for some people, maybe not for others. So kind of going into that, supplements may be needed, really are needed for vegetarian vegan diet plans. That's kind of what we'll shift into here in doing it right. So like I said, what are those nutrients of concern if you choose to follow these diet patterns? The first one is protein. Mm-hmm. So there are adequate sources, especially in vegetarian, because you have more sources or more choices as far as having the milk, cheese, cottage cheese, and eggs. And vegan protein sources, legumes, soy, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and some veggies. The thing about that is vegans may require up to 10% more to compensate for reduced digestibility. So once again, when we have plant sources, they are kind of tied. You'll see a lot when we're talking here that they're tied to something that can inhibit absorption. So that's something to think about. The second one is omega-3 fatty acids, like we just mentioned. If you're vegan, you would choose a marine algae supplement. There are sources that are in the vegetarian and the vegan style, like soy, flax, walnuts, and hemp. But the conversion of that to omega-3 fatty acids is low. So you're still going to be a little deficient, even if you're just eating those. So thinking about if you're a vegetarian or vegan and you have these, doesn't mean you're good to go on the omega-3 fatty acids. So just to think about that. The next one, and most most important one is the vitamin B12.
Yep.
What'd you say?
I said, yep. Yeah. I was just agreeing with you. It's such a big one.
Vitamin B12. So vegetarians, they can get some through dairy and eggs. The intake may still be low. And so they recommend a higher than RDA recommended intake of this supplement, 250 micrograms per day.
And the RDA, just to clarify, the RDA is a recommended dietary allowance, right? And so just to go back even to like the protein, a lot of times what you'll hear referenced is here's how much protein people need. And what they tend to be referring to is what's known as the RDA. Now, in most cases, that's sort of a minimum to avoid deficiency, right? That's not necessarily the optimal. That's not necessarily the top end, right? Or the higher intake or the higher uptake or intake limit. So all that's to say, when we say RDA, we mean the reference or the recommended dietary allowance. But again, that's all you're allowed. That's a baseline number.
Yeah. So, there are some fortified foods such as nutritional yeast, breakfast cereals, plant milks, but supplement is still needed. Interesting enough that this supplement is actually needed for anyone over the age of 50 because we decrease our ability to absorb vitamin B12. It is a water-soluble vitamin, so you're at really low risk for toxicity. So anyone over the age of 50 should be taking like an age and gender specific multivitamin to get the B12. So this is not just for this dietary pattern, but yes, if you're younger and you're vegetarian or vegan, a supplement would be required for this.
I'm going to need you to remind me of that in about 9 years when I turn 50. So hopefully we're still doing this podcast or whatever the version of a podcast is 9 years from now. I'll remember that.
Okay. All right. So the next one is calcium. There's typically adequate intakes of calcium for vegetarians, one, because they're relying on dairy sources for protein. Some vegans sources can be poorly absorbed. Like again, the binder here is oxalate. So oxalate binds with calcium. And so the oxalate content in your vegetables that have calcium sources, you're going to decrease your ability to absorb calcium. So it's not that you can't get calcium from your plant sources. It's just that it's poorly or less absorbed. This is another one that's also vitamin D, very high incidence of deficiency among all populations. So that is something you can consider getting checked through your doctor, your vitamin D status. The vitamin D sources just in general are pretty low. You got milk and salmon and sunshine and mushrooms exposed to sunlight. So there's also fortified foods.
Yeah, on that sunlight thing, keep in mind that sunlight helps the body synthesize that vitamin D. So sometimes I get that question, they're like, how do I ingest vitamin D? But then how does the sun, how does that work? And we kind of generally know that to be true. But just know too that biochemically, long story short, what happens is that sunlight allows you to synthesize that vitamin D in your body, which is an amazing testament to both creation and how your body was intended to interact with it. And just a primer, I'm on some interesting little neuroscience kick. So I think we're going to do an episode here pretty soon where I'm going to want to talk about some of the sunlight stuff I've been learning and incorporating in my morning routine. But all that said and done, a good 5 to 10 to 15 minutes tops, kind of direct sunlight helps your body then synthesize that vitamin D. So when you're talking about dose, everything's dose dependent, right? So it's like the dose makes the poison. And so sunlight is one of those things. There is an effective, powerful, useful, needed synthesis. But keep in mind, that doesn't mean you're laying out, in your bathing suit for 2 hours a day. Well, I'm just trying to synthesize vitamin D. Well, now the dose is getting pretty high. We need to worry about that. So just in terms of that sunlight, that 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how bright it is, that really does kickstarts that synthesizing process.
Yeah. So once again, there's very few vitamin D sources. You have fortified foods and mushrooms exposed to light. So those are your only sources. So you think about definitely needing a supplement here because the intake for vegans is lower. And then the last one, well, no, two more. Iron. Okay, so iron, there's two sources of iron. You have heme and non-heme. Heme is your animal-based, and it is more readily absorbed than your non-heme. Once again, you have inhibitors in the plant sources, decreasing absorption of iron. So it's recommended, if you choose these diet patterns, the vegan or vegetarian, it's recommended to consume 1.8 times the amount of RDA of iron. You can increase your absorption of iron in plant-based sources if they're sprouted, fermented, or cooked grains, beans, or seeds. And you can increase your absorption by pairing with vitamin C. So the beans in chili with the tomatoes in chili, boom, that increased your vitamin C intake. Or hummus, bean, obviously, and bell pepper, vitamin C. There's another pairing.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that I learned so long ago that blew my mind when I was just getting into nutrition science was that bell peppers have more vitamin C than oranges, right? I always say I'm a marketer by trade. Oranges have a better marketing team, right? They clearly have done a better marketing job, because when you think vitamin C, what popped into your mind? Oranges, right? And so, but keep in mind that those bell peppers, I love bell peppers, so that's why I'm glorifying them here for a moment. But I love oranges too. But yeah, those bell peppers are incredible to bring in that vitamin C. So yeah, fun tip for the day.
Yeah. The last one is zinc. Okay, so vegetarians and vegans consume 50% daily recommended intake, because need to consume 50% more daily recommended intake because of inhibitors in plant foods. So those are some things to think about. So the biggest supplement is the vitamin B12. It's 2.4 micrograms, 250 micrograms daily. And that's if you don't eat animal products. Okay. So those are things to think about. If we're doing the well-planned vegetarian or vegan, we can be very healthy. So I saw a really great thing in the articles I was reading of doing it right. So we just did all those nutrients, and maybe that was boring to you. But some of the things that you can do to like make it really simple is grain plus bean plus vegetable plus sauce. Okay, so with this meal building formula here, grain plus bean plus vegetable plus sauce, you're going to definitely include more variety. The sauce is typically a heart healthy fat source. So it can increase your satiety and your calories. Bean is the protein and fiber, obviously, vegetable and grain. So you're getting a good variety of nutrients with that combination. Cool. So examples could be rice with falafel, tomato, and tahini sauce, noodles, tofu, broccoli, and peanut sauce, quinoa, chickpeas, kale, and sesame seed sauce. Or you can replace the veggies with fruit and nuts. Not all the time. You still need to eat veggies. Oats, plus blueberries and nuts and almond milk. Maybe that's a breakfast. Or like some whole grain toast with peanuts and strawberries. So that's kind of a fun little formula to think about. But definitely work with a dietitian if you're considering these diet patterns, so you can really do it right. So
very cool. And you've got, obviously the reason you were leading us through this is one of your passions. It's one of the areas that you love to operate in. And so if anyone's listening, and just as Danielle said, if you're thinking about this, if you're in this lifestyle, you need to make some optimizations within this diet framework long term. If you want to understand how to utilize it in the short term, perhaps for some short term that ultimately lead to long-term positive health outcomes. If you're anywhere in and around this space and we can help, definitely feel free to reach out. Danielle, myself, more than likely Danielle would be able to help you with that. And so just feel free to reach out to us. You can head over to the website, imagonutrition.com. You can go to our contact us page, send us a note and say, hey, I'm looking at, plant-based or vegetarian or vegan. diet framework. And again, I've got these goals, or I'm looking to just get an assessment of what I'm doing and if it's, optimal, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'd love to help you with that. So all that's to say, if we can help you in this regard, we would love to. Hopefully, again, you've seen that we understand that these are not black and white issues. These are not yes or no. It's not go or no go. There are considerations within it. And so we'd love to help you sort through that and make sure that you're on a path toward optimum health, both in the short and the long term. So, yeah, with that, I don't have anything. You did such a good job. You don't want me or need me blabbing on about some things, but I do. I love the way that we just kind of worked through some of those considerations, and that's really what we're about. And we're continuing to learn and grow. And love working with people as they continue to learn and grow in these areas too. So all that said and done, that's the episode on vegetarian and veganism. And so if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you subscribe so you get notifications of future podcasts. Leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing, and share with a friend. If y'all are talking about this stuff, considering this stuff, if this has been useful for you, chances are you know someone that this might be useful for as well. So would love for you to just pass this along. It's a free source of information that we put out there just to help as many people as possible. So, and if you're on social media, you can follow us. We are on all the major platforms at Imago Nutrition. Again, IMAGO Nutrition. And as always, we'd like to thank the band Happy Pill for our theme song, Think About Food, because on this podcast, we're always thinking about food. See you.